Okay, so if you're in the UK and PayPal has just hit you with that dreaded email, the one where they've seized your funds over an acceptable use policy violation, then you are absolutely in the right place. Think of this as your strategic deep dive into the legal arguments you can use to fight to get your money back. First things first, we need to be crystal clear on what we're actually up against. Before about mid-2022, PayPal would label this deduction as damages caused by acceptable use policy violation. Since then, they've shifted to something new, loss recovery. Now, let's be real. They probably made this switch because loss recovery is just way more vague than damages, right? But here's the key, and I want you to remember this. It doesn't matter what they call it. The legal principles you're going to use to challenge it are exactly the same. And it's so important to know this from the get-go. The arguments we're about to unpack are fundamental. They're not just for one specific situation. You can use them across any legal front you might be facing. Whether it's an internal complaint with PayPal, mediation, arbitration, a formal case with the Financial Ombudsman, or even if this whole thing ends up in court, they apply everywhere. Now, there's a really common misconception floating around that this is just some kind of standard fixed fine, like getting a $2,500 ticket for breaking the rules.
The reality? Well, it's usually a lot more serious than that. In most of these cases, PayPal doesn't just issue a fine. What they actually do is a full balance sweep. They confiscate the entire amount of money left sitting in your account. And for many people, that can be thousands and thousands of pounds.
It can feel like a totally impossible situation. I get it. But this is where the strategy really kicks in. The key to unlocking your funds often lies in a clever place, using PayPal's own rules and their own broken promises directly against them. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to build your legal toolkit right now, focusing on the core principles of UK law that are going to form the rock-solid foundation of your case. First up is a real cornerstone of UK contract law. It's called the Penalty Doctrine. What this means, in simple terms, is that a clause in a contract becomes an unenforceable penalty if the amount of money it takes is, and this is the key phrase, out of all proportion to any actual financial loss the other party suffered. The law is about making someone whole, not about punishing them.
And this isn't just a standalone idea. It's heavily backed up by the Consumer Rights Act of 2015. Section 62 is going to be your best friend here. It clearly states that a term is unfair if it creates a significant imbalance that harms the consumer. In fact, the law itself gives a perfect example of an unfair term, one that forces you to pay a disproportionately high sum. Sound familiar? It should.
So all of this leads to a very simple but incredibly powerful point, the burden of proof. Because PayPal is the one claiming they suffered a loss or damages, the legal responsibility is on them to prove it. They can't just say it. They have to show you, with a clear breakdown, how they lost the exact amount of money they took from your account.
Now, let's move on, because this is where it all comes together. This is what is so often the smoking gun in these cases, the way PayPal systematically violates its own promises.
When PayPal limits your account, they send out that standard notification. And in it, they make a very, very clear promise. It says something like, your funds will be held for 180 days, and that after that time, they'll contact you to explain how to get your money out. This isn't just a suggestion. It sets a clear contractual expectation.
But this very promise is where they commit what I call a double breach of their own contract. First, they often seize the money long before those 180 days are up. And second, they very frequently just don't contact you like they promised. So they don't just break one of their rules, they break two of their own fundamental promises.
This specific failure to follow their own rules actually has a name under UK consumer law. It can be considered a misleading action, which is very similar to bait advertising. Now, why is that? It's because the promise of that 180-day hold basically lulls you into a false sense of security. You wait patiently, thinking your money is safe for that period, and it stops you from taking immediate legal action to protect it. So, knowing all this, how do you actually put together your argument? Well, the absolute key is focus. It is just as much about what you don't say as what you do say.
Let's start with what to avoid. Please do not get dragged into a debate about whether you actually violated their policy. Don't argue about your business being legitimate or that you didn't know the rules. To be blunt, PayPal has already made up its mind about that, and trying to argue it again is a complete dead end.
Instead, your argument needs to be absolutely laser-focused on three things. Number one, the math. They have not proven any damages. Number 2, the law. Their contractual term is an unfair, unenforceable penalty. And number 3, their actions. They engaged in a misleading practice by breaking their own 180-day promise. That's it. That is your entire case right there.
And let's just look at the simple math here, because this is so powerful. In so many of these cases, even if a rule was technically broken, there are no chargebacks, no fees, nothing. PayPal's actual quantifiable financial loss is 0. So if they then turn around and take £2,500 from you, the markup is literally infinite. See? This isn't compensation for a loss, it's a punishment. And that is exactly what the penalty doctrine exists to prevent.
Now, it's also really important that we have realistic expectations here. Success is not a guarantee. We do know that some users who have focused on these exact arguments have managed to recover their funds in full. But these arguments are at their absolute strongest when you can show that PayPal suffered 0 financial loss. If your account had a history of high chargebacks or caused other provable damages, your case does become a lot more difficult to win.
And here's a final crucial strategic tip. Your language matters. This is a civil contract dispute. It is not a criminal case. So you have to avoid emotional or criminal terms like theft or saying this is illegal. The correct, powerful, and respected legal term is unenforceable penalty. Using this language shows you understand the proper legal framework, and it makes your complaint so much more credible.
All right, you've got the legal theory, you've got the strategy. Now for the practical part, the step-by-step roadmap to put all of this into action and get the ball rolling. The very first step is to gather your evidence. You need to prove 2 things: that they made you that 180-day promise and that they suffered no actual loss. So, go find that original limitation email, download your transaction history showing exactly when the funds were taken, and get your account records to prove there was a lack of chargebacks. Any chat logs where they confirm the hold? That's pure gold.
In the UK, you have to follow a mandatory escalation path. You can't just jump to the end. You must begin with a formal internal complaint directly to PayPal. Only after they have given you their final response can you then escalate it to the Financial Ombudsman Service, also known as FOSS. You cannot skip a step.
Okay, so for that internal complaint, keep it professional, short, and right to the point. State the exact amount that was taken and the date it happened. And this is critical. You must use the magic words. Explicitly cite the Consumer Rights Act 2015 and the Penalty Doctrine. And then you formally request that they provide a complete, itemized breakdown of the financial losses they claim you caused. When PayPal, and they almost certainly will, rejects your complaint, you then escalate to the FOS. The great thing is this service is free for you to use and it's independent. When you make your case to them, frame your entire argument around the core principle of fairness. Really emphasize that significant imbalance that PayPal's actions created and explain how it was fundamentally unfair for them to take your money without proving any actual loss. Look, the road ahead isn't necessarily going to be easy, but the strategy is clear. The legal framework is there to support you, and the steps are all laid out. So the only real question left is, are you ready to build your case?